I've spent a lot of time contemplating how to do this video, only to realize that such contemplation was pointless. I contemplated switching up my style, drastically, big time. I contemplated using Chompy, Thrash and Jackson, and other special guests from outside the Metal Meltdown to help make certain arguments and crack jokes. I contemplated waiting for the heat and hype to temper and cool before saying or posting anything. I contemplated exactly how one can write and film a review for an album from a band so popular and so divisive in a way that would satisfy as many as possible and offend as few as possible, only to realize that such contemplation is pointless. Because no matter what I say or don't say, no matter what I do or don't do, this video will make some people extremely upset. In my experience, most Sleep Token fans, not all, but definitely a lot, will not accept anything that isn't overwhelming praise. And the Sleep Token haters, I guess as we're calling them, y'all ain't much better. You won't accept anything that isn't overwhelming negativity. And both groups have the tendency to lash out when they don't get exactly what they want, often bombarding me with cruel insults, baseless accusations, and even the occasional threat of violence. It's rare that any video on YouTube makes everybody happy, but it's damn near impossible when the subject of that video is Sleep Token. Which is why I'm not going to bother trying. I am going to be as sincere and as honest as I possibly can be in this video, with no tricks, no gimmicks, no gags, no nothing aside from the occasional drink to help me along the way. I am not here to validate whatever strong feelings you already have about Sleep Token. I'm here to talk about this new album, Even in Arcadia, the things that make it good, the things that make it bad, and everything else in between. If you are not willing to participate in this conversation, I recommend you leave. Now. With that out of the way, let's do it. Let's talk about Even in Arcadia, the latest studio album from Sleep Token, known for their blend of genres both inside and outside of metal and rock, and for their elaborate costumes, stage presence, and lore. They've become one of the hottest bands in modern rock and metal today. I first came to know of Sleep Token back in 2021 with the release of their sophomore studio album, This Place Will Become Your Tomb, which I did not like. And the review that I uploaded for that album is still one of the most unpopular and controversial videos I've ever made. So unpopular, so controversial, with such a strong reaction from the Sleep Token fan base that I felt the need to remove the video. And while I concede that perhaps I could have communicated certain arguments and points better, I overall still stand by the original argument that that album was far too overdramatic and hammy and sappy for its own good. Fast forward to 2023, and Sleep Token releases Take Me Back to Eden, which I honestly enjoyed a lot more. It was a little bit more varied, a little bit more dynamic, a little bit more unpredictable and flexible and weird. Not every single experiment on the album was a successful one, but I appreciated the lengths that Sleep Token was willing to go to create something new and unique and different. I appreciated how they were blending genres together and how they were willing to kind of like blur the lines between what was and was not accepted within metal, and I think I ultimately gave that album like a solid 3 out of 5. That album spawned a litany of viral hits, songs that were used for a variety of TikTok edits and thirst traps and remixes and such. Sleep Token was reaching audiences that the likes of Judas Priest, Iron Maiden, Metallica, Cannibal Corpse, Slayer, they just weren't reaching. Sleep Token was moving beyond simply being metal. I mean, they never were simply metal, but like, now they really weren't. And Sleep Token having this wide of a reach, this broad of an appeal, has very clearly inspired at least a portion of the musical direction of Even in Arcadia. It's always been a little difficult and even risky to label Sleep Token as a metal band. With this particular album, this is the least metal that Sleep Token have ever been. Think of it this way, Even in Arcadia is a metal album in the same way that The Dark Knight is a comedy movie. Sure, Alfred has his little quips and one-liners and snarky comments here and there, but, you know, it ain't exactly up there with, say, The Hangover, or Blazing Saddles, or Monty Python and the Holy Grail, or whatever else have you. Pop, R&B, electronic, and alt-rock, and hip-hop influences, and songwriting structures and formulas and cliches you'd normally associate with ballads and soft, sweeping, piano-driven numbers take center stage here, with metal riffs and screams and pounding, chugging breakdowns and assaults acting more like a garnish for this particular Sleep Token entree. Or, I don't know, maybe like a side dish, or like an extra sauce or gravy that you would pay a couple extra bucks for. Something like that. I don't know. It's worth noting, too, the overall narrative and concept of this particular Sleep Token album. Anxiety and the perils and consequences of fame and getting bigger and more popular and feeling insecure and feeling like your privacy has been violated and feeling like your life has been turned upside down. These are common themes present throughout the lyrics on the songs on this album. In the song Caramel, for instance, the band's lead singer, lyricist, and frontman writes and sings, "They ask me, is it going good in the garden? Say I'm lost, but I beg no pardon. Up on the dice, but low on the cards. I try not to talk about how it's harder now. Every time they try to shout my real name just to get a rise from me, acting like I'm never stressed out by the hearsay. I guess that's what I get for trying to hide in the limelight. Guess that's what I get for having 20/20 hindsight. Too young to get bitter over it all. Too old to retaliate like before. Too blessed to be caught ungrateful, I know, so I'll keep dancing along to the rhythm. This stage is a prison, a beautiful nightmare, a war of attrition." Now, for those of you who don't know, the various members of the Sleep Token band have been anonymous for most of their career. Efforts have been made to dox them by extremely obsessive fanboys and girls and thems, I suppose. And unfortunately, some of those attempts have been, I guess, a little bit successful. I don't know any of the details. I don't have any of the details. And if I did, I wouldn't give you any of those details. But clearly, it's something that has weighed heavily on Vessel. Clearly, it is something that has weighed heavily on all of them. It is what they are directly talking about and addressing right here. Similarly, on the song Damocles, Vessel sings and writes about stress and anxiety and the feeling of being famous, knowing it could be swept away in an instant, loving and hating it simultaneously, comparing it to the sword of Damocles dangling over his head. Writing here, "When the river runs dry and the curtain is called, how will I know if I can't see the bottom? Come up for air and choke on it all. No one else knows that I've got a problem. Well, I know I should be touring. I know these chords are boring, but I can't always be killing the game. No golden grand pianos or voices from the shadows. We'll do anything but feel the same." In a way, Vessel is admitting that he's not even a huge fan of this particular song, but he needed to write it because there's something he finds cathartic about something as mundane and as simple and as generic as just a simple piano-driven ballad. Now, simultaneous to all of this, I do still feel like there's a lot of mumbo-jumbo word salad lyricism here, stuff that is trying too hard to sound really epic and important and, you know, really deep and emotional. It's bordering on the pretentious at times, but overall, I would agree that I'm seeing a more vulnerable side of Sleep Token. I'm seeing more honesty. I'm seeing more transparency. And honestly, I appreciate that from Sleep Token because I think that that makes it easier to really connect with the music and to really kind of vibe with the music. I really admire the production value of the record as well, and the mixing and mastering, and just kind of how it, like, sounds and feels. Like, it has a lot of lush, dense, atmospheric textures and passages. It has, you know, layered vocals and heavy guitars and drums and electronic beats and a variety of different flavors and spices and dynamics. And for the most part, it's mixed pretty well, and it sounds and feels really cool and really cinematic. Now, I will say that some of the heaviest parts of the album do suffer from sounding a little overblown, and as a result of that, feeling like they're kind of suffocating, but there's a possibility that this may be intentional, considering the overall concept and narrative of the album, or at least a good chunk of the songs on the album, so for now, I'll give it a pass. But as far as the actual quality of the music of the album is concerned, ignoring the narrative, the production, the concept, and the idea of blending these genres together, this is where things start to get a little bit more hit and miss for me. Emphasis on miss. Not huge emphasis, more like 60% miss, 40% hit. But nevertheless, large enough that it could, swing an election, or it can be the difference between you passing or failing a test or whatever, so yeah. Alright, I'm gonna be blunt right off the bat. I just found good chunks of this album to be pretty thoroughly boring and unremarkable and a tad forgettable. Not because it's less metal, not because it's more pop, R&B, electronic alt music. It's not because I hate new music and I just don't get it and blah 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 blah. It's because Sleep Token are relying on some of the most generic aspects of the genres that they are primarily pulling from. Like, there are a variety of pop beats and hooks and layered textured vocals that I could very easily find in like top 40 pop and R&B music today. The riffs and breakdowns and screams, the heavier elements of this record, sounds pretty much exactly like something I would hear from a very basic modern day mainstream metalcore band. And I'm sorry, but blending together the most generic elements of a variety of genres doesn't suddenly make it exciting and new and different. It just amplifies how generic it feels, at least for me. The opening number, Look to Windward, for instance, has some of the most flat, basic, uninspired metalcore riffage and percussive poundings I think I've heard in any kind of metalcore or metal style, metal adjacent song in recent memory. It's just pound, pound, chug, chug, pound, pound, chug, chug. It's the kind of stuff that kids whip up when they're writing their very first metalcore song. And the worst part is that, in my opinion, it actively kills the momentum of the rest of the song. It has a lot of atmosphere and emotion and drive, and in my opinion, all of that is derailed by this unnecessary diversion into very straightforward, forgettable radio metalcore. Like, I really enjoy the way this song opens with this kind of like chiptune style intro with like this menu music I would hear from like Celeste or some other kind of like indie video game or whatever else have you. I like the textured layered vocals here. I like the emotive drawls. I mean, that hip hop style beat in the middle could definitely be a little bit more exciting and different and cool. But for the most part, I don't hate the softer parts of this song. It's the heavier parts that actually fuck things up for me. Then there's Past Self, which goes in kind of an alt-pop R&B kind of direction, which, in theory, cool idea, but in execution, the song is so one-dimensional, and that beat is so simplistic and one-note. There are some interesting vocal inflections and dynamics here, but for the most part, this song just utterly bored me. In fact, it's the most full-on boring cut on the record for me. The aforementioned Damocles as well is a very, very straightforward piano-driven ballad. It has some little elaborate flurries and moments here and there, but for the most part, if you're familiar with a 4-chord piano-driven ballad, there's nothing on Damocles that you haven't heard before. The transparency and vulnerability of the song is still appreciated, but when Vessel says, "I know these chords are boring," it's hard not to sit here and go, "Yeah, Vessel, I agree." And the title track, even in Arcadia, is a glorified interlude. Excessive vocal mourning and very simple atmospheric keyboards and textures and soundscapes kind of just constantly going on and on over the course of 4.5 minutes. Overall, I'd say the album is a lot less comfortable with blending genres than Take Me Back to Eden. And ironically, I would say that this album is at its best when it is blending a variety of genres together and really just going for it. Emergence, for instance, does a really cool job at throwing polyrhythms over electronic beats, and I like some of the, swooning, swelling vocal harmonies that you hear in more crushing kind of alt-metal sections later on in the cut. And though the EDM-esque vocal refrain of "go ahead and put your arms around me" feels a tad manufactured in hopes of being used for more TikTok thirst traps edits and remixes, I concede it's a little catchy. The aforementioned Caramel as well has some charm to it. I wasn't really sold on it as a promo single, but in context of the album and in comparison to everything else, it actually ends up standing out as one of my favorite cuts on the album. Like the contrast between the big alt-metal chorus and the more Latin pop, or as some would argue, reggaeton or samba style beat in the verse is genuinely pretty interesting. There's a combination here that I've never really quite heard before, and even if I'm not in love with it, I do appreciate it, and I do kind of vibe with it. Now, in my opinion, the transition that the song takes into full-blown Death Heaven style black gaze at the very end is still not great. It's still not great at all, especially not after having heard a lot of great black gaze recently from Ghostbath, the aforementioned Death Heaven, who just had a new album, Kardashev, if that counts. They're deaf gays. They call themselves deaf gays, whatever. Doesn't help either that this is the most overblown and compressed and noisy and messy that the album really gets. It's just a blur of screaming vocals and emotive black metal leads and these kind of emotive atmospheres and such. I saw some comments from people on the Metal Meltdown Discord saying Gethsemane was one of the most boring songs they'd heard in years. I actually find myself respectfully disagreeing with them. I kind of like the lovey-dovey, dreamy take on Deftones style post and alternative metal here. And finally, frankly, there were a few moments that I just found genuinely a little silly. For example, Vessel's vocal delivery in the beginning of Provider, so hammy, so obviously exaggerated. Dangerous as well, which I think is trying too hard to sound spicy and sexy, as well as the hand claps, the standard kind of boom, boom, clap, boom, boom, clap kind of beat and bass and foundation and infinite baths. I'd also make the argument that some of the longer cuts on the record, like Look to Windward and Infinite Baths, could benefit from having some excess fat trimmed here and there, maybe just 30 seconds to a minute tops, nothing crazy, but I think that would do a lot to make them feel more concise, more potent, more cohesive. So yeah, overall kind of a mixed bag. As you can see, there's an equal amount of stuff that I like and don't like from this album, which means I'm going to piss off the Sleep Token fans and the Sleep Token haters a pretty equal amount. Awesome. Alright, I'm gonna need some more liquid courage because it's score time. Let's go. I'm giving this album a 2.5 out of 5. I think it's okay. I think that there's an equal amount of good and not good stuff on this album. I think that it has moments that are epic and cinematic and very emotional and very, very cathartic. And I also think it has moments that are just kind of bland and simple and generic and basic and unremarkable. I like that Sleep Token is blending so many different genres and vibes together, but I don't like that they're using some of the most generic cliches and songwriting tropes from these genres in the process of blending them. I like that they are being more vulnerable and honest and transparent in their lyricism, but I don't like that there's still a lot of mumbo-jumbo word salad nonsense here and there. I think out of everything I've heard from Sleep Token, Take Me Back to Eden is at this point my favorite from them. I just think it's a way more unpredictable and versatile and dynamic record. I feel like it was more ambitious musically, but this also has more to say. I feel like it's a more personal record, and I feel like this will end up resonating with people more as a result of that. If you happen to love Sleep Token, and if you happen to love this album, great, good for you. Please feel free to tell me in a civil manner in the comments below why you love this album. And if you don't love this album, if you don't love Sleep Token, that's fine too. It really is. Tell me why in a civil and respectful manner down in the comments below. I want to change how we converse about this band. There's so much name-calling, so many insults, so many accusations and threats, so much just stupidity, and it's immature, and it makes all of us look bad. So let's change that. Let's try to actually have a genuine conversation here. Please, for the love of God. I will say this, I think if Sleep Token gets to a point where they just completely abandon all metal and rock influence, I think that will be the point where we just stop talking about Sleep Token, which I imagine both fans and haters will appreciate, and they'll be like, thank God. Until that point, I look forward to seeing how Sleep Token continue to evolve. I still think there's a lot of potential to continue growing and expanding their sound. 2.5 to 5. I gave it a fair, honest shot, but ultimately, it just ain't really for me. It's okay. I look forward to reading through all of your horrible, hateful comments. I mean, I'm hoping that they're, respectful. I'm hoping that there's good civil conversation, but I mean, let's just be real here. Y'all ain't good at that. Thank you for watching. Thank you for being here. I love you. Let me know what you think. Let me know if you like this album, don't like this album. Let me know what you want to hear from me next. Blah, 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 blah. Press this button to subscribe. Boom, even more videos. Join us on Discord. Y'all have yourselves a fantastic fucking day. I'm gonna go make myself a fucking omelet. And maybe drink more. Yeah, that's a good idea.